there's our yarn. So now we will... what will we do?
Put it back together.
Do you know what they are?
Drop scones.
I was just about to say it.
I knew you'd know.
Oh, you beat me to it.
No, I know. It's made me think.
I knew. I need to make some Welsh cakes.
Yes.
Right, do it. What I always do is, put my hands in like this and just give it a little. I don't know what you'd call that. Do that.
Really heavy duty thing with rubber wheels.
Right.
And you would put it on right in the middle.
Yeah.
The piano is on its side.
Oh, I didn't take a photo of you. Oh, we'll do it after, and then you can put it in. I'm so sorry. Editing. Don't understand it. Dharma. Saying Dharma makes me think of Lost. Anybody who's a fan of Lost will understand the hilarious link.
Well, I teach her in to get it over the top, to bring it down onto the carpet. She goes, shoes, shoes. This is now an outtake, Kay.
Oh, all right.
This is removed from the show.
All right, I'm shutting up now. Shutting up. It's an outtake. Shh.
Welcome, everybody, to the Bakery Bears video show, and stop everything, but my favourite Colourways is back!
Yay!
Yes!
Are you ready to dye some yarn?
You better be.
It's brighter than the moon today.
After last episode's excitement with the debut of Kay's Cozy Kitchen, and thank you all so much for your wonderful messages.
Yes.
It's been particularly lovely seeing all the loaves pop up.
Absolutely.
There's been lots of loaves appearing.
Delicious. And jam and pancakes and everything.
Yes, some lovely pancake photos, particularly fun. We had one message actually from an English person, and they were saying that they didn't look like the pancakes they used to have when they were young.
No,
and no,
they're not.
They weren't the pancakes we used to have when we were young.
No, absolutely not. We would call them in this country, we'd call them American pancakes.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's the sort of pancakes that... Do you know what they are?
Drop scones.
Drop scones. I was just about to say it.
I knew you'd know.
Oh, you beat me to it.
No, I know. That wasn't a competition.
No.
I knew you'd know, because you're the expert. I just wanted to try and show my skills.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the most similar thing that we would, the equivalent of in this country would be drop scones.
Oh, you see, now my heart's gone all aflutter.
Now I need to look up a recipe for drop scones and compare it.
No, my heart's gone all aflutter.
You want some Welsh cakes, don't you?
That's what it's made me think of. It's made me think.
I need to make some Welsh cakes.
Yes,
yes.
Do it. It's a very exciting show because, as I said a moment ago, my favourite Colourways is back. We know that you guys love it, and they're going to be interspersed throughout the year this year.
Yes.
So just when your heart needs to get into the kitchen and get out the dye pots and create something gorgeous.
It's so, I'm looking at it over there, it's so bright and fabulous today. It really, we're still in the depths of winter, although we have got lots of spring flowers out now, but it is still winter, isn't it, across most of the northern hemisphere. So this definitely will brighten up a winter day.
But look, we don't just have amazing yarn for you today, because what about the things that you knit with the yarn? Because guess what? If you felt a disturbance in the force, you'd be correct, because I finished another sweater.
Absolutely.
Yes. Later in the show, you'll get to see my finished anniversary.
Yes.
And for any of you who watched yesterday's Self-Contained Knitter, you will already know the tale of woe that accompanies the anniversary. We'll touch on it today.
Oh, gosh.
We'll touch on it today when I show you my finished sweater.
My heart sinks.
The wonderful thing about any time that something goes wrong is that you can learn from your mistakes. And my goodness...
I'd rather not have learnt from that. It wasn't a mistake.
It was a mistake.
What was the mistake?
Well, we'll talk about it later.
No, it wasn't. I don't think it was a mistake. Okay, we'll talk about it later.
We will talk about it later. But yes, anniversary.
Yeah.
Making its not on debut. I'm uncertain when it'll be making its on debut, because the Radari has only just made its live show debut.
Yeah.
We're going to have to hold on to it.
Yeah, but you'll see it on Dan. Yeah, and it's beautiful.
Well, they've seen it on me. It's the picture that was the show at the start.
Oh, do you know, I'm just not even going to try and understand the power of editing.
Kay gets all confused. It's like that scene in Back to the Future.
Back to the Future. Don't start me on that, and don't start me on what's happening in Lost at the moment.
No, we're not going to.
No, me and Bryony have just started the final season.
The writers didn't even know what was going on with Lost.
Yes.
But we've spoken.
The whole time travel thing, you know, you compare it. I thought I'd cracked it with Back to the Future and understanding it. Absolutely not when you're watching Lost, because that blows it out of the water. So, yeah.
Now, look, I know I'm going to be preaching to the choir here, because in life, when you've been married a little while, you tend to learn each other's stories. It's funny, actually, because you don't really tell stories. You do have some.
I'm so boring.
No, you do have some. And they can't be told.
I don't know what he's talking about, literally.
You know what I mean. You know, where you sit down with your partner and they start to tell a story that they've told you 5 times previously. Like I say, I've not experienced that, but you have.
Yes.
And we had such a funny moment just this last week, because I was on the phone to my mum, and I don't even know how we got onto the subject. I couldn't even, if I sat down now and thought for an hour on how we ended up talking about this.
No, I don't
But
know.
my mum tends to be a bit random, so she'll have said something which will have set me off down a particular path. But it set me off telling a story which Kay'd never heard before.
I've never heard it before.
And the funny thing was, I wasn't even talking to Kay. I was talking to my mum on the phone. So Kay is in the background, and as I'm telling my mum this story, I'm just like, there's like laughter. She was completely laughing her head off behind me, which was just hilarious. But I think to build up to that story, I think we should, because there's certain stories which I'm banned telling.
Oh, yes, don't. Yeah.
Well, they don't know the beef burger story.
Oh, gosh, no, we're not going to talk about that again,
Well, they need the yin and the yang. I've been told not to tell the beef burger story anymore, but as you've never heard it, I thought I would just quickly tell you the story which I'm not allowed to tell, because it's only short.
Yes.
I was at school, and we all used to file in for lunch. Think Harry Potter.
Yeah, Dan went to a private school, so
Yes.
yeah.
So it literally was like Harry Potter. You walked in, you showed your hands, they checked your face, and they
Checked
also
your face?
to make sure it was clean.
All right.
So hands clean, face clean, hair brushed. If it wasn't, go brush your hair.
Yeah.
You had to have neat hair. In you came, sat down. There was one table where you could only speak Latin. There was another table where you could only speak French. The French table, there was a certain amount of chat on. The Latin table, nothing.
Silence.
Total silence. Unless you were sat next to the Latin teacher who would deliberately persecute you and ask you questions which you would really struggle to answer. And then he'd tell you off
Latin
in the
must be
lesson
so
afterwards.
tricky.
It is.
Yeah.
I could still recite Latin verbs, though.
Right.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. But you've got no use for them, really. Have you? I mean, there's a lot of Latin into our languages now, isn't there?
There is use for it because it's interspersed in lots of different dialects.
Yeah.
There's elements of it because, of course, they control so much of the world. But in we went on this particular day, and we were having beef burgers. And I cut a hole in one of the beef burgers. So I had the beef burger and I cut a hole in it and I stuck my fork on the end of it. I was right in the middle of the table, so I was far away from the teacher, so I didn't think I'd get seen. I stuck my fork in the end and I held it up and I used it as a monocle. Unfortunately, this was seen by the teacher on the end of the table, and I got put onto the little table. It's like way at the end, like away from everybody. And the punishment on this table, I mean, how the world has changed. The punishment on this table was I had to sit on that table for a week. You weren't allowed to talk. All you got was small portions, and there was no water.
I mean, we laugh, but it wouldn't be,
It wouldn't be allowed. But the funny thing is,
no. But you're still here, aren't you?
I am still here. And the other thing is, I never did anything wrong again.
No, I know.
I never ended up back on that table.
Yeah.
That's the story I'm not allowed to tell. What's the story which will wrap it? No, I won't tell this one anymore now. I'll tell it to everyone now. But what I mean is, it won't become one of those ones which you go, oh, no.
No, because I've heard it a couple of times now, so you can tell everyone. Oh, what are we talking about?
The one they told my mum.
Oh, well, that's fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I thought you meant the monocle. I'm not doing the monocle story ever again.
No, that was it. It's a special edition, just for you. But no, the story that I told my mum was, when I was younger, I used to have a few different jobs when I was going through college, and one of those jobs was I worked for a piano tuner And also, he was a deliverer of pianos. So people could buy pianos from him. He'd also restore pianos. So I remember doing French polishing and all sorts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was cool. And anyway, we would travel all over Yorkshire delivering pianos. So we would start off by going to his warehouse. It was actually at his house.
Right.
So he had a showroom and a warehouse, all that he built himself, which is pretty amazing.
I hope he has some security on that.
Yeah, it was big gates and all sorts. Anyway, we'd go to his warehouse, we'd load the piano on the van, we'd take it out to what was always fairly posh houses, and we would deliver them. And this was a tricky job. It took me quite a while to learn how to do it. It's a two-man job. You've got a man either end of the piano. Normally we were delivering baby grands or even grands. And in this case, I'm pretty sure it was a grand. I mean, I'm virtually certain it was a grand as my memory... Because this thing was vast and it weighed a ton. To get it out of the showroom, we had to use like one of those pulley things to get it up, and then you put it down onto one of these really small, I mean, we're talking small, about this size, really heavy duty thing with rubber wheels.
Right.
And you would put it on right in the middle.
Yeah.
The piano is on its side.
Yes, it'd have to be on its side, wouldn't it?
The lid's off.
Yes.
The legs are off.
Yes.
So what you've just got is a great big long piece of very expensive wood.
Yeah.
And you get it down onto the wheels, and then once it's on the wheels, you load it onto the van, you strap it into place with lots of sheets to make sure that it doesn't get damaged. Yeah. You then get to wherever you're delivering it, and you've got to take it into the house. And they had all these metal ramps that would get it down. You'd wheel it down off, and then you'd wheel it up into the house. Off we'd go.
Yeah.
All sorts of wonderful adventures along the way, but the one that stands out...
Do you remember whereabouts it was?
Well, I just remember it being a really picturesque place in the middle of nowhere in the Yorkshire Dales.
Gosh, right.
And so we arrived, and the lady was pretty posh. Just on her own. I mean, we're not talking stately home here. No, we're just talking normal house.
She's got to have some money to buy a grand piano.
And space.
They're thousands and thousands of pounds.
I think this piano cost £25,000. And so in we go with this piano. And this is hard work. And it was one of the first ones that I'd ever delivered. It's really hard work. You're absolutely... Sweat is pouring off you because it's first of all it's challenging. Secondly, you're concerned because
but you don't want to
damage
bash it or drop it.
Especially me, who early jobs and don't want to. Yeah. So off we go, wheeling it in. Quite a way to get into the house. We're coming up the ladder, not the ladder, the ramp. I'm at the top end, so I'm not having to do all the pushing. And it was Dave. Dave was the guy who owned the business. He's like pushing at the bottom, and he's really struggling. But up we're going. We get into the house, and we're like, there's like a lip to come over into the house, and you're like trying to get it over the top of the lip. You don't want the metal to touch the wood on the house because it will literally crush it. So it's really challenging. Yeah. And literally at the point where the front wheels are off, we're like teetering to get it over the top to bring it down onto the carpet. She goes, shoes. And I'm like, you're kidding. What am I supposed to do? So Dave at the other end didn't say a word.
He just carried on and ignored her.
He stood there. He's like stood there holding it. And I kicked my shoes off. Now you imagine this. I'm delivering something which if it goes onto my foot, I'd be done for.
Yeah, you see, really, health and safety... You shouldn't have taken your shoes off.
No, I shouldn't. Because one of the...
You should have put little baggies on, maybe, on your shoes.
No, I shouldn't have taken my shoes off because my shoes were steel toe capped.
Oh,
that was one of the important things about delivering pianos. So if a piano dropped on your foot...
Steel toe capped. But you
crush it.
can put those little baggies over your shoes.
Very true. But Kay sat behind me, absolutely dying with laughter.
I could just imagine the scene, you know, and you can just imagine it, can't you? These two blokes there just trying their absolute best not to damage anything, not to damage your house,
shoes.
And you're thinking, you're kidding me, you want me to take my shoes off?
Look, that's enough waffle.
Yes.
Because there's way too much to talk about today. So without further ado, I think it's time, because this is exciting, that I asked Kay Jones, what's on your needles?
Right. Well, I tell you what, you need to get if you're not sat down, you need to just... There you go. So you remember on the last show, I had that disaster with Dan's vest, his tank top that was way too big. And I said to you I did have plans for the yarn because it's beautiful yarn and I didn't want to waste it, and I'd got quite a lot of it. So I've had this mad idea, and this has been sort of grumbling around in my head for a while, but this kind of motivated me because I got this yarn. I just had this mad idea of maybe trying to design my own cardigan. Have you all fallen off your chairs?
I did.
Yeah, I'm still falling off, to be honest, and I'm still not quite, I can't quite believe I'm doing it. And the main reason, I'll tell you the main reason I want to do this. First of all, well, there's a few reasons. First of all, it's a challenge, and I love a challenge, and, nothing might come of it, but I will have learned a lot. I've already learned a lot on the way, so that's great. But the other thing that's made me want to knit this is, do you know how I've said in the past that I don't wear dressing gowns, I can't bear them.
Me neither, to be honest.
They're too big, they're too bulky, I don't like tying...
Too warm, too.
Too warm, I don't like tying belts around my middle, because a lot of them have belts, don't they? I don't like that toweling material, and I don't...
Well, the silk ones, I don't know, I always feel a bit weird in those.
The silk ones are useless, they don't serve any purpose, because they're not warm, are they? And they're just...
No, they're a bit odd.
No, anyway, I don't do dressing gowns. And I always wear a cardigan over my pyjamas. And I've gone on about a pyjama cardigan before. This is not technically a pyjama cardigan. However, because I've got a pyjama cardigan, I've got one that was a birthday present from Dan a couple of years ago, and it's beautiful. It's a cashmere grey cardigan. I wear it every night, and I love that thing. So, that serves its purpose. However, the stage of life I'm currently in, I'm boiling basically all night. Oh my gosh, I'm like beyond hot. So, but the thing is, right, you'll be hot, all you ladies out there that have experienced this and will know what I'm talking about. I'm boiling hot 1 second, and then it kind of passes, doesn't it? And then you'll cool down. So I throw off my cardigan at night, when I've got my pyjamas on in disgust, and I chuck it down on the floor and I'm boiling like this. But then in 10 minutes time, I'm a bit cool again. I'll have to put it back on. And when I'm in bed, doing knitting and stuff, watching whatever we're watching, and we're doing some knitting, generally I'd still have my cardigan on, but because it's quite long, it gets stuck underneath me, and then when I want to take it off, it's like this. So I thought, if I had just a little cropped cardigan that I could just pop on, pop off, brilliant. So I thought, right, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try and design my own.
Did you look first, or did you just think, do you know what, I'm just going to design?
Look at what?
Did you think, I'll go look for something that...
No, I've deliberately not looked for a pattern. I've obviously looked at loads of garment patterns in the past, but I didn't want to kind of fill my brain with other people's creations whilst I was trying to do something that... So
you were going straight in, you were like, I want to design something myself.
Yes.
Amazing.
And
I totally get you not wanting to muddy your own design process.
I didn't want to do that. And I'd got an idea in my head that, right, if I'm going to do this, it's got to be the simplest shape that you can knit and produce a garment. What I don't really like about knitting garments is I don't like knitting top-down garments, because for start, that beginning bit, there's a lot going on, isn't there? You're doing generally you're doing raglan increases, you get to the underarm sleeves, you take the stitches off, and then you've got all of that body to knit. Ugh. And I just get bored, and then you've obviously got to do the sleeves and all of that palaver. So that, right, if I can just knit a garment in using the simplest shapes possible with the least amount of shaping, and then I think that for me will work better. So I had that in my head, and I thought, right, okay, how do I find out what is the simplest shape that you can knit a garment in? And then I remembered a book, and I bought this book, this one. You probably know it. A lot of you will probably know this. So it's Anne Budd, Book of Sweater Patterns. the Knitter's Handy Book of Sweater Patterns. Now I've got another one from Anne Budd, which is like more accessories, and I've used that quite a lot. And what this book does, it's brilliant. It gives you, basically it starts off and it gives you a load of gauges and stitch counts. So what you do with this is you do a swatch. Is the first thing you do. Whatever yarn you've got and whatever needles you want to use, you do a swatch and you measure the gauge, and then you look it up on a chart and follow all the numbers for that type of design that you want to do. So I thought, this is great. I can look up in here what shape of cardigan is the simplest. I can do a swatch with the yarn I've got, and then I can base it on that. And that's what I've done. I haven't used the exact numbers from this, and I absolutely haven't used the same method, but this was my sort of basis. So I sketched it out. I decided the shape of cardigan I wanted. So I'm doing a modified drop shoulder, and there is one that's just a drop shoulder, and that one is even simpler. But with the drop shoulder, the basic drop shoulder, you end up with quite a lot of fabric under here. And the modified one cuts out some of that fabric, and still it's very simple. So that's the one I've chosen to do, the modified drop shoulder. It's all knitting, they're all knitting pieces. So in here, it gives you instructions for a cardigan. You get a back, 2 fronts and 2 sleeves, all knitting pieces and then all seamed together. Button bands are picked up afterwards. Although I like knitting in pieces, for the cardigan, I wanted again to keep this as simple as possible. So my theory was, if I can knit this in as few pieces as possible, with the least amount of seaming and the least amount of picking up, then that's going to be, keep it to its very basic, simplest form. So what I chose to do, I'll show you everything that I've done. I've swatched and I've started it. I'll show you all that in a second. But what I chose to do is, I'm knitting a cardigan, and instead of knitting a back and 2 fronts and then 2 sleeves and seaming it all together, I modified all my stitch counts, and I'm knitting the back and the 2 fronts and the button bands all as one piece. And then instead of, well, this is my theory, I've obviously not got to this point yet, but in theory, what I will then do is, when I've completed that, I will seam, I think you seam the shoulders together or something, and then I will, instead of knitting the sleeves separately, I'm going to go and pick up around the arms and then knit the sleeves down. So there's actually no seaming at all. That was my kind of thought process. So I then sketched all this out. I wanted to put in a stitch pattern. I didn't want to do it just plain because I knew I would get bored. I'm using a stitch pattern which is really, really pretty, but it's really simple. So again, it's just keeping everything as simple as possible. This seems to be working for me. I'm not bored yet. So it's a cropped cardigan. At the moment, I quite like the idea, again, this is the keeping it simple strategy of the sleeves. I think I'm just going to knit straight down and then decrease rapidly for the cuff, so you get that balloon look, which I do really like, and it's very popular at the moment, isn't it? And that just keeps it again to its simplest form, no decreasing apart from close to the end. I might change my mind on that, but we'll see. So the first thing I did was a swatch, because I wanted to do a decent size swatch to decide just what I was doing with regards to the stitch pattern. And then after I'd started the swatch, I decided I wanted to do the button bands at the same time, so I added that onto the swatch. And I'm using the BC Garn Samilla, and this is burnt orange. And I swatched with this. I'd already effectively got that huge swatch of Dan's tank top. So I knew on that I was getting 6 stitches to the inch, but I thought, I'm going to swatch anyway. I'm not going to be silly about it. I'm going to swatch anyway again. And I did still get 6 stitches to the inch in the pattern as well that I've chosen to use. So here's my swatch, and it's got a little lace pattern in it, and I've blocked this. So here we go. Can you see that? So it's a really simple little lace pattern, but it's super pretty. Now you can see at the top here, I decided to try garter button bands here. So I added that in and I really liked that. So what I decided to do, instead of a 1x1 rib at the bottom, even though that looks really nice and it does flow into the pattern lovely, to keep it consistent, and again, the simplicity thing, instead of having to do rib, I chose to do a garter. What would you call it? Because when it's ribbing, it's ribbed, isn't it? When it's not rib, but it's still the bottom ribbing, what is it? You know what I mean. I'm doing garter ribbing at the bottom and then garter button bands and then lace. So I'm going to have, it'll be lace, full lace on the back and 2 fronts, but then I'm going to do the sleeves plain. 2 reasons I decided to do the sleeves plain. One is that I'm knitting this bottom up and the sleeves will be top down. So the lace pattern will look the wrong way up. And I did think about adjusting that. The problem is there's a central double decrease, which it just doesn't, you know, I've turned the design the other way up and looked at it, and it just doesn't look quite the same, and that would bug me. So I thought, right, okay, I'm just going to do the sleeves plain, because I think that'll be really nice to have a full lace front and body and then plain sleeves. And what that will also allow me to do is, if I decide to do some decreases down the sleeves, there's no pattern there to affect that. So again, simple. So yeah, this is the swatch that I did and blocked it, and it just blocked so beautifully. This yarn's gorgeous. So I thought, right, okay, I'm ready to cast on. I'm using 3.25mm needles. It's really like a sport weight, I would say, this yarn. I think it's either sold as a sport or a DK, but it's not a DK. It's really more like a sport. But basically, you need 6 stitches to the inch. I'm saying it as if you're going to knit this. This is just for me. I'm not even thinking about anything other than that at the moment. I'm going through the process and I'm learning is what I'm doing. So I've started it. Now there's a lot of stitches because this is a lightweight yarn really. And I'm doing, like I said, I'm doing the back, 2 fronts, button bands. I'm doing it all together. So there's a lot of stitches. And also I'm doing it with 2 or 3 inches of positive ease because I want this to be a nice relaxed fit. So, but this is where I'm up to. So I'll just show you a section of it so you can see. Hopefully you can see. I've got the garter at the bottom there, and then the button bands are here running up the side. I've put 1 buttonhole down here right at the bottom, and even things like this, I had no idea really how to space buttonholes. How far apart should they be? You know, when you're knitting from a pattern, you just do what the pattern says, don't you? But I didn't want to look up a pattern. I googled it actually, and it came up more as a sewing thing. Do you know, if you were making shirts or blouses and things, it came up under that. And generally, I think it said between something like 2 1/4 and 3 inches apart seems to be the norm. So I'm going to put them about 3 inches apart. So I'm not quite there yet, putting in another one. And then what I'll do is work out how many rows then are in between, and then I can just replicate that going all the way up. Now the edge here, because it's garter, I could have slipped the stitch on the edge to make that, you know, that you get that sort of slipped edge look, which I know a lot of people like. But again, I didn't do that. A couple of reasons. One, I don't mind the look of a garter edge, but also the whole way through this, I've just kept that simple word in my head. And every time I think I'm going to make a decision to do something, I think, right, okay, is that necessary? And will that make it more complicated? So I thought, no, not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it plain and simple as that garter edge. It's fine. So all I'm doing at the moment is just, you know, knitting basically you knit a huge rectangle, and then when I get to the underarm point, so when I think it's long enough for the sort of cropped length that I want, I will then do what you've got to do then to create effectively the front, the back and the front. You do sort of some decreases under the arm here and then work the panels. So I've worked out how I'm going to do that, you know, having just 1 piece rather than 3 pieces. So yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at the moment. I'm just working my way through it, and it does take me a while to knit a row. You know, there's a lot of stitches, you can see, but I kind of prefer that. Stretch it out, you can see. I kind of prefer having to do longer rows at this point because I know that all I've got to do is knit this one piece, and then I've just got to do the sleeves. And the only thing that I'll have to do after that is just to pick up for the neckband, because the button bands will already be done. I just need to pick up the neckband and just knit a little bit of garter there. So yeah, at the moment I'm really enjoying it because it feels like I'm learning such a lot, and it's a lovely knit. The pattern is really nice. It's really simple. There's lots of just plain knit a row, purl a row, but then you've got a little bit of something to do every it's an 8-row repeat. So that's keeping me motivated. And I bought my cardigan a little present the other day. Can you see these beautiful little stitch markers? Look. They are Swarovski, I can't say it, I blew it. The Swarovski crystal stitch markers from Jules's shop, So Sweet Violet. I've wanted some of these for ages, and I had a reason to buy some. And they're just lovely. It's like a little bit of jewellery for my cardigan. I'm knitting a cardigan, everyone. I've designed, I suppose I have, haven't I? I've designed and I'm knitting a cardigan. I haven't given it a name yet, which is strange because I normally name things, don't I? But I haven't given it a name yet. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'm using Higher Bamboos, which are one of my very, very favourite needles. They're gorgeous, and 3.25mm Higher Bamboos. Just lovely. Really enjoying it. I will keep you posted. I'm going to do a design diary on this. So patrons who are watching, look forward to a design diary just when I'm a little bit further in. Dan Jones?
Yes.
What's on your needles?
Well, look, I finished a jumper, so that means I have to fill my jumper bag, doesn't it? Anyone who knows me will know things are not right if all my bags aren't filled with a project. So I came to the conclusion that the moment had come finally to knit Kay a jumper. So I said to her, go and have a look and decide on what you would like. And she went through all sorts of different books. She had a little look at my Wilderness Knits book, and she had a little look on Ravelry, and then she also looked through my Lopi books. I can't remember exactly which ones they are, but then she went online and started having a look, and she found this one, which is just gorgeous, isn't it?
It is.
I love it because it sort of turns knitting on its head for me a little bit, because instead of you sort of doing the colour work with the different colours, you're actually knitting the body with the different colours, and you're doing the colour work with the main colour yarn, which I think is really cool. So what we came to the conclusion of, and there's also a male version, what we came to the conclusion was that the right thing to do was to try and find, because Kay tried on one of my, she tried on my Ridari, I think it was, and she doesn't really like the yarn very much, and I totally get that, because it really is, it's either love it or hate it, I think, because, you know, I think that if you went for a walk in the wilds in one of these jumpers, you would immediately see the benefit. Also as well, I think if you were forced to wear it for a long time, by the end of that process, you would have got used to it. And I think that's what's quite difficult for us, because it's not often that we're put in those positions, are we? We can choose to wear whatever feels most comfortable. We don't have to think how we used to have to think years ago, which is when we had to pick what we wore to suit the environment that we were in. This is definitely an environmental jumper. I like that. Now, with regards to the name, I can't even begin to tell you what it is. So I can't even hold it up because it's a paid for pattern. So what I'll do is I'll just stick it up on the bottom here. I think it's 8, but I think that's what that pattern means, the name of it. I think it's 8, but you know, do correct me if I'm wrong. It is just like the Ridari and the Anniversary. It's by the same designer, because she's just brilliant at designing these types of things. And this book is probably the best that I've seen of all of them, because in 38, which is what this is, there's such a varied range of patterns. There's blankets, and there's also tree skirts and all sorts. It's just tremendous. I absolutely love this one. So we needed to find a new yarn. So we started off with Malabrigo, and these are the two that I tried, and I obviously swatched, and I'll show you my swatch in a minute.
It's Malabrigo worsted.
We got some of this and gave this a go, and we came to the conclusion quite quickly, well, not quickly enough for my mind.
No.
After a few rounds, we came to the conclusion that it just wasn't quite right. And also, as well, it makes me want to eat chips.
It's vinegary. It's got a very vinegary smell. But so this was pearl, and this is that word.
So what Kay also identified, she went on Yarn Sub to find lots of different choices of yarns that we could have a go with. And she also found this, which is Rico. And it's got wool in it, and it's also got in it not wool. But that's fine.
It's 50 wool, 50 acrylic.
And, actually, I mean, it feels pretty good. I mean, it certainly feels woolly. It has a sort of slight reminiscence to Let Lopey, but it doesn't have a massive amount of give in it.
No, it doesn't.
But that's okay. So, I've been doing a huge amount of swatching. It looks like a crazy hat. So you can see down here, this is the Malabrigo, and then I've just then started knitting with the Rico. And honestly, the Malabrigo was a real pain to knit with, and that's because, I don't know whether it's just these skeins, but they seem to be very tightly worked. So when you just have, if I held the yarn out straight like that, if I let go of the bottom, it would twist up on itself.
Yeah.
So what you find then is if you're doing colour work, that it's twisting around, that twists around itself in a way which I've never ever experienced with any other yarn I've ever knit colour work with. So I was sort of glad not to use that yarn. This definitely works up more Let Lopey-y, if that is in fact a word. The only thing that it just isn't quite the same is, but then you felt the Let Lopey and you felt that it didn't have a lot of give. I think it's just the difference between a man-made fibre and a natural fibre, and granted, I mean there is some give in that.
There is a little bit.
That's
It's a single ply, just like the Let Lopey is, and it's worked up really nicely. I just got him to do a little bit of colour work just so I can get an idea of the gauge, and he's getting a gauge which is, the pattern calls for 18 stitches to 4 inches, but when I checked on the 2 jumpers Dan's knitted, his gauge was more like 20 stitches to 4 inches, and we're getting about that with this yarn, so I know it's comparable, so we can work out what size to do.
What really was the deciding factor with not using the Malabrigo was the fact that it's so heavy. And we really were concerned that even if I knitted it with my sort of abilities now to size, because I feel quite confident now in being able to size sleeves for length and also bodies to get them right for whoever's going to be wearing them. So long as the person's with me, I feel confident that I can size it right. The concern was, though, because Malabrigo is so heavy, first of all, that it would drop, so there would have to be consideration given to how much it would drop. But secondly, also, there needed to be consideration in how it would be actually wearing the garment once it was finished, because I don't think that you particularly wanted some heavy jumper.
No, I think it was my friend actually who said, just think about the weight of it, and I hadn't thought about that, and she was absolutely right. And the other thing that swayed me against not using this is it's quite hard to come by Malabrigo worsted. I really struggled to find enough of like one colour in a colour that I wanted for the body, and I really wanted to use this sort of chocolate brown as the body. Couldn't find this anywhere, enough of it. And then the other thing is, obviously I know that Malabrigo colours are from dye lots are quite variable, so I might order what looks like lovely on the screen and it might be different when it comes, but also because it's like kettle dyed, you really need to alternate.
Which I didn't have a problem in doing.
No, Dan didn't have a problem in doing that, but I prefer garments that are not in hand, effectively, it's not hand dyed, but you know what I mean. That kind of variegated look, and especially when you've got all that colour work going on, I didn't want to detract from the colour work by having a body which was very variegated. So we decided on the Rico because there's lots of, it's all solid colours, it's commercially dyed, we shouldn't have a problem. So I think I'm going for like a navy blue background and then bright colours.
So she's going to order the yarn and I'll cast it on in the next week or so. I'm not really sure. But that is my new cast on. You can find out the full story. Actually, I went into quite a lot of detail on that in the Self-Contained Knitter, which just came out yesterday. What else is on your needles?
Well, my next thing is a pair of socks for Bryony. This is a new pair. And this is yarn, actually, I've had in my stosh. My stosh? What's a stosh? My stash for ages. A few years, it's got to be. And what motivated me to cast these on is that Bryony has just, well, we ordered them and she's just received yesterday a new pair of boots really. She really wanted some Doc Martens for sixth form because up until now she's had to wear uniform a whole school life. It's children wear uniforms here in this country, which is great, but she's super looking forward to getting into sixth form where she can kind of show her personality a bit more, and she really wanted some Doc Martens, and she chose a colour that obviously I found almost impossible to find. And she wanted yellow, and it's a really nice yellow. It's not a bright yellow, it's quite a sort of muted goldy sort of yellow. It's really lovely. I eventually found them in a shop in Europe. I can't remember where it was in Europe, somewhere in Europe, and they came yesterday and they fit and she loves them. So a few days ago I said, look, and that coincided with her telling me that she actually likes socks that are a bit longer, she announced to me. So I thought, right, okay. I said, right, I'm going to knit you a pair of socks then for your new yellow boots for when you start sixth form. And I remembered this yarn in my stash, and I went and got it, and she said, perfect, use that. So that's what I'm doing. This yarn it's not intentionally Hufflepuff colours, but it looks exactly like Hufflepuff, and that's why I bought it. So it's from London House Yarns. And it's Grello. It was a sock set in Grello, so it's grey and yellow stripes.
I didn't get that.
Grello, that's
I get it now.
Grey and yellow.
Now you've said it. I'm so stupid.
It.
I was genuinely thinking, why is it called that?
So it's a Grello sock set, and it's an 80-20. It's the high twist one, which I've got to say, it's not my favourite. You know, the 2-ply high twist. It's just not my favourite for knitting socks, but I've got it for this. And Bryony doesn't care. She's not bothered what yarn it is. I just find it a tiny bit hard on my hands knitting with it for some reason. So, and it's lovely. I'll show you the sock and then I'll pop it on the blocker. Look, isn't it nice? And I've put in my butterfly heel because it's self-striping, and this heel, perfect for self-striping. And she's got a few pair of socks now that I've knit with this heel, and they fit her absolutely fine. She said they feel the same as her other socks, so I mean that's brilliant, isn't it? So let me pop this on and then we can look at it a bit closer. And I only cast this on the other day, didn't I?
Yeah.
And I've been knitting away like crazy on it, so because you can see how long the leg is. Oh, that looks good actually. Oh yeah, look, it's much longer. It's a much longer leg. If you know how long I knit my legs, I usually knit them to about 5 inches. This is more like 7 inches. Oh, it's perfect, isn't it? So when I was knitting the leg, I wanted to end and to be doing the heel in the middle of a yellow stripe so that it looks, so you can, the heel goes into that yellow stripe, and I love the way that looks. And just luckily, when I got to that point, I'd reached sort of 7 inches, and I showed it to her, and she measured it on her leg, and she said that was fine. I think it will just peek out of her boots. It might sort of be here, just peek out of her boots. So yeah, so I've just plain stocking stitch straight down. I put in my butterfly heel. This heel is in my lattice top socks. And then I'm now just on the foot, and I'll do a yellow toe. I'm saying I'll do a yellow toe. It depends where these stripes end, because if it ends on a yellow and then you do a yellow toe, that's a big chunk of yellow, isn't it? So I'm just going to see where it ends, and it might be that I just carry on the stripes to the end of the toe. We'll see. But I think it looks really lovely, and it's great to use up yarn that was in my stash, and it is perfect Hufflepuff colours, isn't it? Really, really nice. So yeah, I'm using 2.5mm needles to knit these because Bryony likes that extra bit of, she likes her socks to feel a bit more relaxed. She doesn't like being, strangled into her socks. And I'm actually using some needles that I've not used for years, and I'm really enjoying them. I'm using Knit Pro Nova's Magic Loop, I haven't used these, years since I've used them, and I'm really enjoying using them again. I'm not having that problem with the tight stitch down the join, which I really like. I love the Chowgoo mini twists, but I get that tight stitch and it really bugs me, and it's because the cable is so thin that you get that tight stitch, or I do anyway. So I'm really enjoying not getting that with these, and I'm just really, really loving them. I want to kind of get these finished fairly quickly if I can, and I'm just knitting down them really, really quick. So
that was just luck that yellow ran into
was. Well, I wanted it to. I wanted to start the heel, but just fortuitously. And I did say to her, if you want them even longer, I can knit through another repeat, but that would have been another 2 inches. And she's like, no, that's too long. But I think, compared to how usually my socks are down here, the leg wise, so it's definitely 2 inches longer than I normally knit socks. So I think these will be perfect.
It's more mittens. It's the pieces of home mittens. And my goodness, have I learned some stuff on here. Because, first of all, just look at the yarn. It's Crazy Zauberball is
great.
The contrast colour. And then the main colour.
It looks brilliant.
I can't remember what the main colour is.
It's the Viking.
Oh, yeah.
It's called Viking.
There it is. And it's just lovely. It works really well with it. It is different to the Zauberball. And it's quite fun actually knitting with 2 yarns which aren't similar I'm sort of used to knitting with, like I'll be doing colour work with 2 yarns like that, or I'll be doing colour work with 2 Ricos, or 3 or 4 Lopes, or, who knows what. So to do it with 2 completely different yarns really is quite fun, because they both work in a different way. So you sort of have to adjust how you're working. But just look at it. It's cool.
Brilliant, isn't it? I think it looks great.
If you think that side's good, this side's even better.
Look.
It's really fun. I love how the white sort of, well, it's not white, is it? The Viking, the creamy, what colour is that?
Grey. It's pale grey. Pale grey.
Grey. I love how the grey comes into those sort of squarey type shapes with the dots in the middle. But what's so cool is seeing the change going on in the Crazy Zauberball. That's just amazing fun seeing that. And after watching Kay do this this is of course the Pieces of Home by Miss Wrap and Turn. I've changed the pattern because I of course did the Dan braids. They're supposed to be Latvian braids. And what I did for the first time, although I have done a backwards loop cast on before, but I did a backwards loop cast on. But what I did was, and it didn't say to do this, but I did it because this is what you did on the other mittens, is I alternated between each of the colours for the stitches I had to cast on after I cast off. Well, not cast off.
All right.
I put the stitches on hold, and then that's what you did. You alternated.
Because it told me to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. Did it not say to do
Didn't say to do that, but I did do that. And the reason why I did that is, first of all, I got halfway across casting on 13 stitches with the Viking, with the grey, and then I thought, hold on a minute, we've got a serious problem here, because how are we going to carry the yarn?
How are you going to carry the yarn?
You can't do a backwards loop cast on and carry the yarn.
No.
So I thought, I know, I'll just do what Kay did. I'll do an alternating backwards loop cast on with each of the yarns.
Right, is that what I did?
You did.
Did I do that?
You did.
Wow.
So you did that on the other mitten that I'm knitting, the Star mitten, which I think I showed you last time, and I'll be back again probably next show. But yeah, so I did that, going all the way across, and I felt so pleased with myself. I was just like, yes, yes.
Does it look okay?
It worked. I think it looks fine for a first go.
Oh yeah, looks great.
So these have become like super addictive, and the reason being is I've particularly enjoyed doing this, which is of course the increases for the thumb gusset. It's so cool.
It's pretty.
So really, really enjoying knitting this, and I feel like fingering weight pan things are now my thing. What else is on your needles?
So the last thing I've got today is something that's dragging and dry. Oh my goodness, I'm in the land of distraction at the moment, not the land of make-believe.
The land of distraction. That sounds like a Genesis song.
Does it?
Yes.
It should be, shouldn't it?
Land of confusion.
Land of confusion.
Yes.
I'm in the land of distraction. I'm just getting distracted all the time, and I don't know if it's this whole hormone business that's going on, but my focus is, I'm just struggling to keep, my focus on something. I'll be like jumping between one thing and another, and that's not really like me. So these haven't progressed as fast as they should have, but it's Dan's Scrappy Opal socks.
I'm not convinced that isn't like you. I think it is like
one.
you.
Do you?
Yeah, because you, right, just listen a minute. You've gone through periods of time where you physically have written down exactly what you're going to do from 9 till 10, from 10 till 11, from 11 till 12. And that's not in the last couple of years. You were doing that probably 3-4 years ago.
No, and
then you stopped.
Yeah, but I am kind of more doing that now because I am sort of doing that. I just feel a little bit distracted then, let's say. So, I mean, if that isn't transferring into my productivity, then that's okay.
Well, I don't know about that. That wasn't what I was talking about. What I was saying was that you have, in the past, been the same.
Right, okay.
So what I would suggest to you is when you're in this zone, this is the time to go, right, 9 till 10 I'm doing this. And I think you've just said that you probably are doing something similar to that.
I'm trying to do that, yeah.
Well, if you do that, you stick to it. I'm not saying you stick to it. You do stick to it.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
When you choose to plan your day that way, you do stick to it.
Yeah.
And it's all about knowing yourself, isn't it? And knowing what works for you. And if you need to plan your day like that at the moment, then do it.
Yeah, definitely.
This issue all comes from her messing around with her planners.
It does.
That's where it comes from.
Absolutely does.
She should have just stuck with what she was doing and everything would have been fine.
I haven't felt settled in my brain since I changed all that, which I'm still working on it.
You changed back though.
I changed, well...
And you said that you've been feeling a bit better.
Yes.
So
I've started doing what I was doing previously, and I do feel a bit better about it.
Lesson learnt, don't change stuff for the sake of it.
Yeah, I know.
A bit like our living room 15 years ago, or whenever it was, 10 years ago.
Let's move the settee over there. The settee, that's old fashioned. The sofa. Let's move the sofa over there. No.
But you've effectively done the same thing with your planners.
Yeah, I know,
but
how was I supposed to know that it would affect me like that?
If it's working, though, if something's working, if you're like...
I know, but sometimes change is better than rest, as this.
From the woman who says, I don't like change.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, back to Dan's sock. I have finished one of his Scrappy socks. I'll put this on here, but it's just ridiculous. It doesn't go on, just so that you can see I've finished it. There is another block.
Don't worry about it.
No. So yeah, I've finished one of his Opal Scrappy socks. Look at that. Isn't it cool?
Yeah.
So I'm using my advent calendars of Opal. Do you know these little balls that they used to do? And I bought 2 of these 2 consecutive years, so I've got I've used parts of them, but there's still most of them in there. So I'm using those. Doesn't it look brilliant?
Yes.
And I'm doing just a 2x2 broken rib, which is just knit 2 rounds and then knit 2 pearl 2 for 2 rounds. The thing I've done differently with this sock is...
It's a new toe!
Well, kind of. I've modified my umbrella toe to be longer. To be bigger, not wider, if really. It's longer. I've just staggered the decreases. I've done it at a much slower rate to produce a toe that it starts. I don't know if you can tell, but it starts here at the end of this sort of red stripe, goes all the way obviously to the toe. So a toe generally for me is just short of 2 inches. This is more like 3 inches, and I think that will suit. You did try this on, didn't you? You did try it on and it seemed to fit quite well.
Yeah.
So I'll see what the pair's like, when he wears them and how they fare. But then I think I'll use this for his toe, much longer toe decreases. And I just had to compensate for that by knitting the foot, I think something like 6 rows shorter, because I'd got those extra rows in here. Might have been more than 6 rows, I can't remember, but in any case I just sort of decreased it off the foot and added it onto the toe and just worked out what to do. So yeah, that's the first one done. They're really fun. And I'm on the second one. So I'm still on the leg. Look at that, isn't that lovely? So all of this was one colour, the sort of pink and blue, and then this sort of salmony pink here was where I started another colour. And it's this one, it's going to run into sort of these oranges. But it just seems to be taking me forever. And it's, I started those socks for Bryony, and I've been, working on my cardigan. Obviously, it's taken a lot of time in, not necessarily in, knitting time. It's just taken a lot of time figuring it out and, researching and doing all of that. So, these really should be done by now, and they're not. And I'm sort of punishing myself because that's what I do. But I will get them done, because you've not had a new pair of socks for ages, have you?
No.
And you've worn through a couple of pairs recently, I think.
Yeah.
So I really need to get these done. But I'm really enjoying them. 72 stitches, 2.5mm needles, and these are my Colourways mini twists I'm using for this, just because there's a pattern in it, so you don't notice that tight stitch quite so much when there's a pattern in it, I find. And I'm trying to be a bit more deliberate on my ends here, so I
But
reduce
you've
that.
already learnt that the way to get rid of the tight stitch is not to use these needles.
Not to use these needles. It's because the Colourways mini twist cord is so thin, and what happens is that last
tightens
stitch
up, understandably.
tightens up. So when you move to this, when you start knitting on your second needle, just don't pull as hard. And I don't really pull as hard. I think it's a subconscious thing.
You've been loving using those Knit Pros.
I have been enjoying the Knit Pros, yeah. So
was there any reason why you wouldn't just stick with those?
No, not at all. I'm going to order. I've only got one set of 2.5mm actually in the Knit Pros. I'm going to order another set when I order your yarn for the jumper.
Really interesting, isn't it, that?
Yeah, and it's funny because I remembered a specific holiday that we had at Chatsworth when we stayed in the Russian cottage. I was knitting a pair of socks for Dan, and I think that might be the pair that I've just gone through.
Amazing.
It was in sort of browns, really pretty, and I was using those needles, those Knit Pro Novas. And isn't that funny that you remember things like that?
Well, clearly you like those needles.
I always loved them. And you kind of forget, don't you? Something new and shiny comes out.
This is the episode. If it ain't broke,
I know.
Don't try and fix it.
I know. I'm just hoping when I order, because it's years since I've bought a set of those Novas. I really hope nothing's changed on them.
My granny used to say variety is the spice of life, but once you find the spice you like, stick with it.
Well, I think that's absolutely true. If you're happy and you're contented doing whatever that thing is.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
Then just carry on, my brain is in turmoil since I started this whole planner thing, and
Look, that's enough of that, because I think it's time that we join Kay. She dived back into her potions books and shared with us another amazing colourway. So, without further ado, let's sit back and relax and enjoy the next episode in this series of my favourite colourways.
Over the last 7 years, I have created hundreds of gorgeous colourways. Hidden away in my library is the little book that contains nearly all my secrets. These are the recipes for creating all of my colourways, and in this series I'll be showing you some of my absolute favourites. I'll be taking you from undyed skein to finished colourway, because it's time for us to discover Welcome back everybody to my favourite colourways. Very exciting day today because we're dyeing up a yarn colour which I only just created recently, and it came about for a couple of reasons actually. One, because I got some new dye colours, which is very exciting. I got some new Dharma dyes, and historically I've only been able to get Dharma dyes from America, but I just thought I'd have a look because it's been a couple of years probably since I got any, so I thought I'd have a look around. And actually I found, I think it was on an Etsy shop, an Etsy seller in the UK that was selling Dharma dyes, so I ordered a few new colours. And I had to try out those few colours. So I did that and I created this colourway that we're going to be dyeing up today. It's one of my favourite shades of colour. It's, I mean, you'll see when we dye it, but it's just the prettiest shade of yarn. It's absolutely gorgeous. And when I dyed it up, it just reminded me, because you know I was pulling the yarn out of the dye pots, and I just felt a bit like, I say a witch in the sort of friendliest term. Think of Buffy or Sabrina or something like that, you know. I just felt like sort of that witch pulling something out of a cauldron, and it just, an idea popped in my head for the name, to call it Just Add Magic, because me and Bryony watched a series, we watched it a couple of times now, called Just Add Magic. It's a fantastic series, and it's all sort of all witchy and teenagey girls being witches and things. It's really good. So it made me think of that, so that's why I've named it Just Add Magic. And the colour to me is so pretty that I just thought that it has to be magical. So that's what we're going to be dyeing. We've got some new dye colours, we've got a brand new colourway, and I'm also going to show you a coordinating colour as well. It's a very simple, straightforward colour, but I thought let's do a little coordinating mini as well, why not? So that's what we're going to be doing today. So the first thing we've got to do is see what we're going to need to dye up our lovely Just Add Magic. So what we're going to need to dye up our lovely yarn today is all the usual culprits, and then obviously the dye colours, which will be different today. So the first thing I've got is my yarn. Now today I'm just going to be dyeing up one skein of the main colour, and I've got a 85-15 blend. This is a fingering weight skein of yarn. And then I've also got just 3 mini skeins here. These ones are actually, it's the same base, but it's got sparkle in it. It's not going to match entirely because it's got a sparkle, but that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And I've got 3 here, just because one to go with this yarn, but then I've got plans for the other 2. So I've got 3 mini skeins. These are 20 grams each. So those are going to be the coordinating colour. And then we've got 1 skein for the main colour. I've got my dyeing pots. As usual, these are stainless steel. It's like a casserole size pot. I like the ones with 2 handles because they're easy to move around. Only ever use, once you've used equipment for dyeing, keep it for dyeing, don't use it for anything else. So I've got 2 pots today. I've got just a plastic washing up bowl that I use for soaking and for rinsing. I've then got a pair of rubber gloves, some old tea towels just to protect your work surface. I've got my trusty big spoon, the mordant which I use, and that's citric acid, my mask, and then I've got a couple of brushes because we're going to be doing some speckling today, and a little measuring spoon that I always use. This is 1/8 of a teaspoon measure. And then that just leaves us, with the dyes. I've got my dye book as well with the recipe in, but it just leaves us with the dyes. We're just going to be using 3 colours today. 2 of them are Dharma and 1 is Jacquard. So I'll describe the colours to you, and then you know if you can't get hold of these, you can just replace it with whatever is the most similar that you can access. So first of all, the Jacquard is my trusty gold ochre. If you watched me in these series before, you know I use gold ochre a lot. I haven't been able to find another sort of yellow tone that really works as well as gold ochre. I've used lots of yellows from lots of different brands, and this, I always come back to this one. It's one of my favourites. So gold ochre from Jacquard. And then I've got 2 Dharma dyes. These are new to me, these colours, and rapidly becoming my favourites actually. So the first one is Fluorescent Fuchsia. It's number 406, Fluorescent Fuchsia. And as the name, you know, gives you a clue really, it really is a neon fuchsia. I think we all know that sort of neon pink colour. That's this in a pot. And then I've got a colour called Fawn. Dharma again, it's called Fawn, Fawn, and this is number 453. And this one it's a brown shade. You know, imagine the colour of a fawn, you know, a deer fawn. It's that sort of colour. But this, I found out, is fantastic for speckles. It produces the most beautiful coloured speckles. Absolutely gorgeous. So that's what we're going to be using the fawn for today. So just those 3 colours today to produce the lovely Just Add Magic. That's everything we're going to need to dye our yarn today. So it's time now to soak the yarn. Okay, so I've got some warm water just from the tap in my bowl. I don't know, 1/3 full, something like that. I've not got very much yarn, so you don't really need much water. And I'm going to add some citric acid to that water, just to get that mordant into the fibres before we actually dye it. Now normally, if I was dyeing up a sparkle yarn, I would just soak it in plain water. I wouldn't put any citric acid in there. But because I've got a mixture today, I am going to soak it with some citric acid. It won't be in there very long. The reason I don't normally soak sparkle yarn with citric acid is that it can dull the sparkle if it actually stays in the acid too long. So we'll just make sure it's not in there too long and we'll be okay. So I'm going to put in about a scoop, which I think these are about a tablespoon. I'm not sure the scoop came with it. It's about a tablespoon, maybe a little bit more. Yeah. Into the water. And then just give that a swirl around to dissolve it. You can tell when it's dissolved because you won't feel those grains any longer. And then we're going to pop our yarn in. That's fine, that's dissolved already. So in it goes. These, as usual, I've put these on these reusable cable ties. And we're just going to pop that in, push it down and let it have a soak for a good half hour. Just, you know, what I tend to do is I soak my yarn. It's the first thing I tend to do. I'll get everything out ready to dye yarn and I'll put it to soak while I'm just getting everything else ready. And by the time you've done all that, it'll be fine. So, there we go, that's lovely. So I'm just going to leave that now to have a nice little soak and we will get everything ready to dye our yarn. Okay, so I've got my water here which is heating up nicely. I've put in a bit more of the citric acid, another scoop into there, and it's about half full, I guess, my pot there with water. So the first thing I need to do is put in the first dye colour, and that's going to be the fluorescent fuchsia. Here it is. Gosh, be careful when you open this. If you're using this colour, it is so vibrant that I'm just super careful with it. I've already managed to get blue on my finger, which, how I've managed to do that when I'm not using blue, I don't know. So we're just going to open it really carefully. And I'm going to put in, I don't know if you can just see how intense the colour is. I'm going to put in only about 1/4 of my 1/8 of a teaspoon. So let's go with that. Let's give that a try first. Look at that. Isn't it fabulous? So I'm going to put the lid straight back on. We might need to do a bit more, but let's go with that first of all and we'll see what intensity of colour we get. So I'm just going to give that a little stir. It's a gorgeous colour, isn't it? Look at that. My goodness. So stirred in, that's lovely. So now we can put our yarn in. So just grab your yarn, just give it a squidge. And then just shake it out so that we are, just releasing the fibres so they're not all clumped together, those strands. And then in it goes, and I'm going to use my spoon as I drop it in. Now do this quite rapidly, moving it around as we go. It's all in. And now I'm going to lift it straight up and just move that on the skein, just so that we don't get that sort of pooling that can happen. Even with a tonal, that can happen. Now I'm just moving it around, you can see in the pot, and I'll just turn up the heat a little bit now. It will disappear quite quickly, And that is a good colour. I'm trying to remember the sort of intensity of colour from the last time I dyed this. And I think we're pretty close. I'm going to wait until all that colour has gone from the pot. And then I'm just going to eyeball it from memory from the last time I dyed it. Let's have a look. I think that's pretty good actually. I'm just going to move it one more time there. I'm just going to add, you know, a smidge more. Something is telling me that last time I dyed it, it was just a smidge more intense. So all I do to do that is I grab the little bit first, and then I'm just going to quickly lift it up, pop it in, give it a stir, and then just drop it straight back down again. And once again, I'm going to move that quickly on the skein. That's better. That is the colour I remember now. That's much better. So you want quite a good level of colour, if you know what I mean. I hope you can see the shade of pink there. It's gorgeous, actually. So all I'm going to do now is let that come up to heat. At the moment it's nice and, you know, it's quite hot in there. So I'm just going to bring it up to simmering and just keep stirring the whole time, because then we'll get a nice distribution of colour. When I first put this into the pot, if I'd just gone down like this, and then just left it, what that will produce is the bit that went into the pot first gets a real hit of colour, and as you drop the rest of the skein in, it gets a little bit less. And if we leave it like that, that's when you can get that sort of stripy look with your tonals. So that's why I quickly moved it on the skein, and then why I've just kept it moving in the pot, because I do want a good distribution of colour. I want it to look, you know, as pretty much not the same all the way through, but the same sort of intensity of dye colour all the way through the skein. We're really pretty much there. You can see in the pot now there's hardly any of that pink left. So I'm just going to give it another minute until it starts to simmer, and then I'll just turn the heat back down again and we can do the next colour. Okay, so that's nicely hot now, and if you look into the pot, there's the merest hint of pink. That's fine. So what I'm going to do is just take the yarn out, just give it a squidge as I do it, and then just quickly move it over to my bowl, which I've emptied out. And then I'm going to put my other colour into here. Don't worry if you've got that residual pale pink, it's totally fine. So the next colour is going to be my gold ochre. I'm just going to make sure my spoon's really dry. Okay, so gold ochre, I'm just turning the temperature down now to sort of keep it nice and warm. And I'm going to put in about the same again, about 1/4 of an 1/8 of a teaspoon. But again, you know, we might jiggle with that, and let's just see what that does. So give that a stir. I love this colour so much. You get that sort of yellow, but it's it's gold, you know, if you think of the colour gold, that's just what it is. That's the sort of yellow that I really like. That's fine. And if you want to make sure it's all dissolved, just let it settle like that. And can you see there's some dye specks still at the bottom there, swirling around. So I'm just going to give it a little bit more of a stir. Some dye colours I find take a bit longer to dissolve into the water, and some just go in, you know, really easily, and some you just have to stir a bit longer. That should be fine now. So I'm now going to bring my yarn back in, and I'm going to drop it in like I did before. So just give it a little shake again, just to loosen off all those strands. Okay. And then same as we did before, this time I'm going to drop it in a little bit slower than I did before. So in it goes, and just a bit slower. And this time I'm just going to let it go in like this and leave that now. I'm just going to stand here for like a minute or two, because this time I do want that gold in there, but I do want to retain some of the pink through the skein. So I'm just going to hold it there for a minute, and then I will lift it, and now I will move it so that the rest of the skein get some of that gold colour. I'm not going to sort of jiggle with it too much this time. I'm just going to leave that now until that gold is dispersed. It'll only take, it won't take very long. I'm just going to crank up the heat a bit. When you're dyeing, I always find that when I'm dyeing sort of tonals or, this is a tonal, but really it's not a variegated because we're layering the colours. It's not really, I don't know that I would class it as a variegated. I'm not quite sure what I would class it as. But I find that it can vary a little bit from one skein to the next because it really does, it is dependent on how much of that dye you're putting in there. I mean, that's the case with any colour, but with some colours it doesn't matter as much. But with this you will get a different intensity of colour through the whole skein. So I'm going to let that come up to temperature now, and then it'll be time to do some speckling. Okay, so that's nicely up to temperature now, and there's still a tiny hint of colour in there, but that's fine. I do find with these really intense colours like turquoise and neon pink and those sorts of colours that you do, very often there'll be a tiny residual bit of colour in the pot. It's fine, it's not a problem. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to do some speckles on top, but to do that we're going to have to remove some of this water because we've got far too much water to produce good speckles. What we want is when the yarn goes back in the pot, the sort of top of the yarn wants to be just above the water. And now just move it around so that you've got as much yarn on the surface as possible. I'm just looking at how much water's in there, and do you know what? I'm just going to take out a tiny bit more. That's better. So I hope you can see that we've got a lot of yarn now that's just above the surface of the water, and it's nice and steamy, which is good. I'm just keeping the temperature it's just run really low under there. So to do the speckles, I've got the fawn and a paintbrush. Any old children's paintbrush is fine. Don't spend a lot of money on your paintbrushes that you're going to use for dyeing. It's just not worth it. So here's the fawn. In the pot, you can see in the lid there, it's like a kind of greyish brown. And in the pot itself, it just looks like a dark colour. But I find it looks like coal dust, doesn't it? But I just find this produces a really gorgeous little speckle. Now we're going to attempt to do little teeny tiny speckles. So to do that, we need to be gentle and we need not much dye powder on our brush. So just literally dip it in and then tap it off. So we're going to go really gentle, and you might not even see it land on the yarn at first. Keep it close to the yarn. Can you see there's probably a bit too much that went on there? Just tiny little taps. That's better. Can you see in that corner? You probably can't, but that one over there, that's too much. We're going to ignore that. Just little tiny specks is what we're after. And it might, like I say, it might not even look like there's anything coming off, but give it a second and you should see it. Go back in your pot. And when I'm putting it on, I'm just giving it like a few seconds because that's when it'll appear. I think that's probably okay for the first going over. So I'm just going to pop the heat back on actually. And just give that now a few minutes to set those speckles. And the way I test it is I just sort of choose an area and I just push it down gently with my spoon, and if the speckles don't move and no dye sort of emerges, you're fine. Generally I find if just leave it a few minutes, 2-3 minutes is normally enough because they're such fine speckles that it doesn't take long just to set them because we've got that heat, at really good level. Those speckles are set now, so we're just going to move the skein, because if I was just to end the colour there and didn't do any more, all of the yarn that's kind of underneath this surface area wouldn't get any speckles, so that's why we're just going to lift it and move. Now you can see as I lift it, I don't know if you can see the tiny little speckles there. It's really gorgeous. So let's lift, just move that, and then turn it and drop it back in. Shufty this all around so we've got as much yarn on that surface as possible, and you'll probably see that some areas you will see already have a few specks, but likely there won't be many on there, and there isn't. You can see there's not a lot of speckling going on there, and we're just going to do the same thing again. Okay, so now we're just going to leave that again to set that second layer of speckles, and then once it's up to temperature and it's just had a few minutes, I'll just test it again with my spoon just to make sure those speckles are set, and then we can pop it outside to cool. So there we go, that's our beautiful Just Add Magic all dyed up, and it's having a little chill outside. So come back in part 2 when we're going to be taking a look at that skein we've just dyed. We'll be rinsing it and doing all that lovely stuff, but we're also going to dye up that coordinating mini. So I will see you back soon.
Let me tell you, I will never cease to be amazed by what happens when you add that gold ochre colour.
Oh, I know.
It's literally
gold
just like magic.
I know, Just Add Magic. What a great little link.
I know.
Well done, that man.
And I love subtle speckles.
Yeah, they're brilliant.
I can't see it yet.
No, I'm not going to show you yet. I've got it right here.
Because she hasn't finished yet.
No.
It's still drying.
It's still drying.
No, you haven't finished dyeing it. Oh, no, you have. You finished that one.
I finished that one.
Yes.
We're going to do the mini.
Yes,
yeah.
I know. It's going to be amazing. But how did you learn that technique with the gold ochre?
No idea. I can't remember. It's that far back.
I wonder if it was like the man who discovered boiled eggs.
I don't know. I mean, the first colourway I remember using
was it an accident?
It
must
might
have been
be.
like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, it might be Hobbitland.
Right.
I don't know if anybody's got any of that lurking around in their stash, but I dyed a colourway called Hobbitland, and that one actually it's all blues, all blue tones, and then it gets over-dyed with gold ochre.
Right.
And all of those blue tones, you do retain some of them, but most of them turn into different shades of green, and it's just beautiful.
Right.
It's a really gorgeous colour. I should do that one, shouldn't I?
One of my favourite colours.
Yeah, maybe I should do Hobbitland.
That's an early one, isn't it?
It's quite an early one, yeah.
That's
But
exciting.
I love it. It's a gorgeous colour, yeah.
Neil, look, if there's one thing to get excited about, it's a sparkly mini.
Yes.
So yes, later on in the show, Kay's going to be dyeing up a contrasting sparkly mini.
Yes.
And I have to say that I think the most surprising thing for me was when I was filming this and I watched you start dyeing the colour you've just dyed, I thought, oh, she must be doing the mini first. Because it starts
off that colour.
It's like...
Yeah, I know. It starts off that colour. Yeah, it's brilliant.
It is so like alchemy. You just... you wouldn't believe it.
It's so fun to mix colours. You've just got to be careful that you don't layer too many. If you layer too many colours, it just turns brown.
It's funny that, isn't it?
Yeah. But if you stick to primary colours, so if you were to, what are the primary colours? What are they? Blue, red and yellow.
I didn't know that.
If you stick to those, then I find that doesn't generally happen, because when you mix those, you get all the other colours, don't you? It's only then when you mix those other colours with another colour that you can get brown.
It's such a fascinating subject, especially colour wheels and I mean, it blows my mind. It's so great. Thank you so much for that first part. It's just marvellous. And later on, yes, sparkly mini time. But look, to get to that, we need to get to something very special. Because yes, it's time for Kay to ask.
Dan Jones.
Yes.
What's off your needles?
I know. Yes, I've actually finished something, and it's vast.
It's beautiful.
Look at this.
It's beautiful. It's all been blocked and lovely. Look at that. Is that not amazing?
Now,
it's gorgeous.
What I will say to you is this. When I put this on, I felt it so differently to the Radari.
Really?
And I spoke about this a little bit on Songs and Knitting yesterday, and that is, I just wonder if all these jumpers, because, you know, it's naive to think that a product that has come from nature is going to be the same every time. It's all going to be slightly different, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because this feels a lot lighter.
Does it?
And what I've found is that the different colourways of Let Lopi are different.
Yeah.
For example,
you have said that.
The black tends to be thicker and more felted. The brown and the green tends to work up with much more even stitches, much more like a yarn that you would expect. The white feels overworked.
Right.
Like it's, I don't know, like they've had to work really hard to get it to that colour. Right. It feels like it's been messed with more than this.
Right.
And I could just go on and on. Every different one of the colourways just feels that little bit different. And so if you take all those ingredients together and you put them into something, I suppose it makes sense to think that it would create a unique product.
Every jumper's got its own character, which is lovely, isn't it?
Yes.
It's like it's a little person that you're putting on.
And it makes me feel addicted to making these.
Yeah.
So I think I might always have to make one.
You have got another one on the go.
I do, and when I finish that one...
That's the Alexander that you've got on the go.
I do. When I finish that one, I'm going to cast on another one for me.
Another Let Lopi.
Yes. Right. Because I said to Kay the other day, I can't remember exactly how I said it to you. And you said that was such a funny review.
Yeah, you said something like, it's the best, it's my most favourite yarn that I've ever knit with, but it's the most awful to wear.
Yes.
Something like that. It's very contrasty, isn't it? And you know, I think your opinion on wearing Let Lopi, everybody's different because, you know, different people have different sensitivities on their skin.
Yes.
And when I put Dan's Ridari on, I was like, whoa. I just had a vest underneath.
It's like someone doing this all over your body.
Isn't it?
Is that what it felt like to you?
I couldn't concentrate on anything because all I could feel was jumper
Prickles.
on my body.
Trekking through the wilderness, there is nothing better than this.
I was saying that I would wear it if I had a shirt underneath it, a long-sleeved shirt. You know, so if I was in an environment, you know, somewhere cold, let's say we went to Lapland on holiday or something, then I would love to have one of these and I'd wear a long-sleeved shirt underneath it, and then I think it'd be great.
So what's the story? Basically, what happened was, when I was finishing the jumper, Kay did one underarm for me, and when she did it, I videoed it for myself, so that when I come to do the Alexander, I'll just be able to do it.
Yeah.
Woohoo! But when I came to do this side, I remember, only in the process of finishing this jumper, I remembered something that I did when I was knitting the Radari, and that is this: when you finish, you end up with your yarn in the middle
of where you're going to graft.
Yes.
So you end up with,
because you've got two sleeves, haven't you? And you've knitted it in the round, and so I ended up with the yarn in the middle. Well, what I did was, I mean, actually thinking
carried
about
on
it,
knitting to the end of that point, because it had you finish in the centre of your underarm, but then you've got your stitches to graft top and bottom. You end up with a yarn coming out of the middle of those stitches.
Yeah.
So I just used a separate bit of yarn to graft. And then
what I did first time was I knitted across those few stitches to get the yarn to the end.
So that you can then use that yarn to graft.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what we ended up with was, the yarn in the middle.
Yeah.
I then wove the yarn in upwards, as you would, going up. Effectively, it wasn't going up, it was going up the sleeve.
Right, yeah.
Then when I put this on, the first time I'm putting it on, I'm feeling like the king of the world. I felt like Leo on the front of Titanic.
You tried it before we'd blocked it. Just, you know, you want to put it on, don't you?
And when I was taking it off, was it my right or my left sleeve? I think it was my left. I think it was my left sleeve.
Right.
So what I did was I pulled down here,
So you took it off like that.
and this pulled the yarn that we'd woven in this way. That then pulled on the Kitchener that we'd done, and because it was pulling on one stitch really tightly, it snapped the Kitchener.
It snapped the Kitchener.
Now, Kay fixed it. Kay unpicked it all, redid the Kitchener, job done.
I had to unpick the whole Kitchener and the weaving in and everything, get the stitches back on the needle.
The learning
Let
point.
me tell you, I didn't enjoy that.
The learning point is this: it's twofold. First one is, I'm never going to do that again. I'm going to make sure the yarn's at this end. But if for some reason if I ever was in that position again where I had the yarn in the middle, I would have woven it in along the line of the seam.
Yeah.
And that way then it wouldn't have created the pressure point when you pulled.
Pulling it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's finished.
But it's finished and it's beautiful.
And I've learnt my lesson.
You've done a fabulous job. It's gorgeous.
Thank you so much for all your help.
Well, that's okay.
Getting me to this point in my knitting abilities.
I was so angry.
Without you,
it was.
I couldn't do things like this.
No, I know it was late at night. It wasn't late. It was about 8 o'clock, but it's late for us. Well, when you've been up like me since generally I'm up at 5, it's late, isn't it?
It
8
is.
o'clock at night feels late.
By 9 o'clock, I want to be in bed.
Absolutely, I'm asleep.
Getting ready to go to sleep.
And it was just like, you're kidding me, and I knew at that I didn't fix it then. I thought, right, just put it by my chair, I'll fix it tomorrow. But that was like in my head, I was like, but anyway, it's done.
Kay Jones, what's off your needle?
I finished the hat I was
love it.
working on.
It's
Look.
beautiful.
So this is the
beautiful.
coordinating hat for the Christingle Mingle cowl. It's actually downstairs. I had it on this morning for my walk, and then I got back in and I was boiling. What a shock.
Yeah.
So I flung it off, it's downstairs. But yeah, this is the Christingle Mingle hat that will be part of the pattern. I'm going to add this in as a little bonus pattern.
Beautiful.
To the Christingle Mingle cowl, which will be coming out later in the year. Yeah, just as a little bonus with the leftovers. And I really like the decreases that I do. They're quite, it's like it's quite a rapid decrease. And it produces this sort of, it looks like a sunflower. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, it produces this kind of bunchy sort of decrease. And I really like that. I think it's cute. And I only do this sort of decrease when I've got a hat that's quite long, so that you've got that, so that you're not taking away length, if you know what I mean, from the actual body. So this will be plenty long enough for just a little cute little hat. Look. Perfect little hat with the leftovers. So yeah, this will be, and the blue is nice with my eyes actually, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yes. Very nice.
Yeah. So that's the Christingle Mingle hat, and that will be within that pattern that'll be coming out once we get through the autumn. I think I will pop that pattern out, so people who are then getting advent calendars this year, if they want, they can have a cowl and a hat from their advent calendar.
Right. I can wait no longer. I want to dye up a sparkly mini.
Oh, yes.
Yes, let's get back to the second part of my favourite colourways.
Welcome back, everybody, to my favourite colourways and the beautiful Just Add Magic colourway. So it's time now to dye up the coordinating mini, and then to rinse them and do all that loveliness afterwards, get it dry, skein it up. But the first thing we've got to do, of course, is to get back in the dye pots and dye up that beautiful pink mini. Okay, so we're now going to dye up our coordinating mini. Now for this, we're just going to use the fluorescent fuchsia. So really, this is entirely up to you how strong of a colour you want. You could just put in, a tiny bit, and you'll just get that pale pink. I say pale pink, it would be pale pink, but it would still have that neon edge to it. It's entirely up to you. I'm just going to put a little bit in and see what the colour's like, and then take it from there, really. So it's just going to be a straightforward tonal. So I've got another pot here with about a third full of water. We've only got 3 minis, we don't need very much water. And then I've put some more citric acid into there. So that's heating up nicely, so I can now put in the fuchsia. Okay, so before we used about 1/4 for a full skein. This time we've got 3 minis, which is 60 grams. So I'm just going to go with a little bit and just see what the colour's like. So let's see what that looks like. Give it a stir. This colour seems to disperse in really nicely. Doesn't take much stirring. Okay. So let's grab those minis. Let's give them a little shake. And let's drop them in. Yeah, that is pale. That is really pale actually. But let's see what we've got. So they're all in. Can you see how pale that is? But you know, you might like that. Just move each of them on the skein and drop it back in. It's definitely going to need some more dye, but I think it's good to show you this sort of level of colour, because this might be your thing. You might want it this subtle of a colour, and it would go with the main skein. Because we're using a colour that's in the main skein, we know that it's going to coordinate really nicely. So you can see that it's a gorgeous shade of pink actually. It's beautiful. It's really pretty. It's like a sort of princess pink, that, isn't it? But I am going to put in a little bit more. It's better to do it this way, especially with a new dye colour, because you can build up the colour. You obviously can't take it back out again. So let's just put in a tiny bit more and see where that takes us to. I'm just basing this on, you know, how much I put in before. That looks better, doesn't it? And let's drop that back in quite quickly. In it goes. And then just move it again quite quickly, just so we get a good distribution of colour. See, that looks better, doesn't it? It's definitely still a bit paler than the one I dyed before, but I think it's really nice. Maybe what I'll do, yes, I'm doing this on the fly now. But I'm just thinking, oh, it's a gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous shade of pink. But let's give it a bit of tone by speckling in some more colour and then just pushing it straight away. And that'll just give us a bit more of a sort of variegation of the pink. So let's just grab a brush. I'm doing it with a brush because this dye colour is so strong. But let's just speckle in a bit, just all over quite quickly, and then grab my spoon and just push that straight away. That's going to give us some nice variegation now. And we'll just do it on that top layer like that. Let's move that out of the way now. And that will give us sort of a lift to it. We'll get lots of tones now running through the minis, and I think that'll be really pretty just to see the difference between a sort of solid, well, it's not even really a solid, it's more of a tonal, to now what will be slightly variegated. I think that'll be really nice. And I'm only going to do it on that one layer because these are minis, so I'm not so worried about creating that kind of pooling or striping effect. I wouldn't just do one layer like this on a main skein, but on a mini I think we're okay, because these will likely go into you know, heels and toes or scrap projects, and I think that, you know, that's fine. I'm just going to bring this up to temperature like we did before, and then once it's up to simmering point, I'm going to turn the heat off and I'll pop it outside to join the main colour. Okay, so we're ready to rinse our yarn now. I've got a bowl with some warm water in and some wool wash. So I'm going to do the main skein first, so the full skein. I'm just going to drop that in and just give it a little wish around. All I'm doing is I'm rinsing out the citric acid and any sort of little dye particles that might have still been hanging around. So I just tend to sort of lift it up a couple of times, maybe move it if you want to, and back in. You can leave it in there if you want for, you know, a little while. It won't come to any harm, but I find that I just like to get these things done, so I'll just give it a nice move around like that, and that'll be fine. So just squidge that out, and then I just sort of loop it around and give it a nice squeeze. Never wring your yarn. I'll just pop that one over there. You can see the wool wash bubbles are sort of dispersed, but it'll still be in the water, it's fine. So same thing with the minis, and you can see we've got no dye at all in the water, which is brilliant. It means that everything's set nicely. So just give that a nice little swim around. Get rid of all that citric acid. And the same thing, just squidge. And then I just sort of curl it around. It's got some nice tones in it, this pink, I can see. Give it a squeeze. And what I would normally do now is just pop it on the line outside and just squeeze out as much water as I can, and then just hang it in the house in front of a fan heater, and it'll be dry in an hour or so. And then we can have a look at it and skein it up. So our yarn is now dry and looking gorgeous. Oh, isn't it bright and fun? It is lovely to dye up some bright yarn, I think, from time to time. Generally, I'm more of a subdued colour type person, but, you know, when it comes to knitting socks in particular, why not have a beautiful bright pair of socks? I think it's just fantastic. So here's our full skein of the Just Add Magic, and here's the coordinating pink. It's absolutely lovely. So we just now need to rearrange them a little bit and skein them up. So let's take off our thingy that I can't remember the name of. I'm not even going to try anymore. So I've got, what I always do is, you know, put my hands in like this and just give it a little, I don't know what you'd call that, do that. And it just evens out all of the strands, because they've been floating around in that dye pot, and we just want them to now be lovely and even in the skein. And that's great. Now, what ties have we got on here? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, is that right? No, we've got 4. So we've got the main one here that's holding the yarn together with the ends, and I always keep that at the top here where the sort of knot bit is going to be on the skein. And then I just look at what else I've got. So I have got a tie that's right down here, so I'm going to snip the other 2. I don't think it's necessary to have them all on there, so I'm just going to snip the other 2 and take those off. That's one, and then that one up there. There we go. So now we just need to put it in a lovely skein. Those speckles actually look great. They do. I was worried they were a little bit heavy, but actually they're not. They look lovely. So let's just skein it up. 6, 7 twists. Gorgeous. And just put one end through the other. So now let's have a look at one of those minis. I've got 3 here, so I'll just do one of them. So exactly the same process. I think this might be a longer skein. These particular minis, I ordered them from the dyer that I always use these days, because you can order small quantities. I ordered them from Yarn Undyed, and they just look different this time. And it had a sticker on the bag, and it said that they still might have some spinning oil in there, but that'll disappear if you dye in it. It'll just go in the water. It just looked different. The texture of it looked different, but actually I've dyed some of this already. Once it had been in the water and once it's been dyed, it looks perfectly fine. But the ties on it just are slightly different. I don't know if they've just got sort of different production methods, but I'm just going to check with the ties, because I find them now a little bit confusing. That's not holding the ends together. That one isn't, so presumably this one is. It doesn't look like that one is either. Right, what I'm going to do, because I'm finding these ties so confusing, I can't figure out which one is the ends. I think what's happened is, I think that they've used the two ends instead of what normally happens when you put the ties around. You have a little length of yarn and you put the tie around, you know, and tie it in a knot. And then when you've got the end piece, that means that you've got the two ends from the tie and the two ends from the yarn. But I just wonder if what they've actually done is just used the two ends of the yarn and created that into a tie, and that's why there's only two ties. So because I can't quite tell which is which, I'm just going to leave on all of the ties because I don't want to snip the one that's actually holding the yarn together. So I'm just going to leave them all on. So we just need to skein this one now. Gorgeous. And adding that extra bit of dye on top that we added with the brush and then pushed it down, that's given it lots of tones and even a few speckles in there as well, which is a lovely little bonus. So I'm going to now go ahead and skein up these other two minis and then we can take a closer look. Beautiful sock set we've created, a little sock set here, haven't we? But this one is our Just Add Magic. I didn't actually name the pink, so you can call that whatever you want. It's a gorgeous shade of pink, so pretty, and we've actually ended up with some speckles in there as well as sort of some nice tones of pink, so that's brilliant. But yeah, here's our lovely Just Add Magic. It has come out definitely a bit more intense than the last time I dyed it, but you know, that's absolutely fine. I think it's beautiful, and the speckles have come out really nice and tiny, which is what I wanted. Just gorgeous. And I've already knit, this was the other skein, the first skein that I dyed up. I was so madly in love with it, I very quickly, I think it might have even been the same day that I dyed it, I just got it dry straight away. So yeah, I've knit it up into my wrist ticklers. So this was the first colour we did, and then we've got the lovely Just Add Magic. Don't they look really nice together? Pink and then that sort of peachy corally colour. So it's definitely more intense, this one, than the first time I dyed it. I love them both. But you know, all that's happened is this one's just had a spot more dye in than this one. It's perfectly fine, and I love that really about hand-dyed yarn, that in this instance, you know, we weren't trying to match it entirely. All that we're doing is showing you how to create this colour, and then you can decide whether you want it a bit paler or more intense. So who knows what the next one's going to be. The next time I will have completed the first wrist tickler, and that's so exciting. But I think I knit this section, it felt like in about 3 seconds, because I was just so excited to knit it up with all those little tiny speckles. Aren't they just lovely? That fawn colour is just fantastic for speckles, because it's not a really like dark intense colour. It's not like we're using black. It's more of a sort of softer look, but you still can see all the little speckles. It's perfect. It's a really great colour for speckling. I love it. So there we go. That's our Just Add Magic and our coordinating beautiful pink. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that you might get into the dye pots and create your own little bit of magic. So I will see you next time for more my favourite colourways.
That was so much fun. Oh yes. Gorgeous yarn.
I know.
Show it. I know they've just seen it, but look, here it is in the flesh.
It is. So here it is.
Talk about light up a room.
Oh, look at that. The pink's fabulous, isn't it? Look at that pink.
Imagine a jumper in, that's the main colour.
I know.
With stripes of this.
Yeah. Sarah, isn't this amazing?
Sarah is Dr. Sarah, who runs the Flower Power Fund.
Flower Power Fund.
I mean, just such an amazing...
And she knits all the socks for all of the people.
And she's Sherlock_knits
Yes.
on Instagram.
She's fabulous.
Follow her and her adventures
Yes,
across Yorkshire.
absolutely. But yes, she's a fan of pink, as I am. But this one's gorgeous. But yeah, can you see the tiny speckles? Look, little specks. Aren't they lovely? Gorgeous. And although this is like a orangey shade, can you see the undertone of pink in it? I love that. It's one of my favourite shades. And this one did come out, as I said, it came out a bit more, there's a bit more depth of colour than the first one I did. But I love them both. And in fact, I think I like this one better. But this one, I'm not keeping it. This one will be used for something very special that I'll talk about a bit later into the year.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that was
Gorgeous.
another marvellous My Favourite Colourways, and it will return on the 22nd of April. Because next time, it's time for us to venture back out for the next, weather permitting, of course.
Yes.
Hopefully. We're actually
the weather.
We're doing a radio show all about the weather, which will be coming out next week. All about the British obsession with weather.
Absolutely.
We'll be talking about our favourite types of weather conditions, our least favourite types of weather conditions. We'll be digging into why it is that the British have this reputation
for being obsessed
for
with the
obsessing over the weather.
Yeah.
But I can tell you I'm obsessed over the weather because it's just been crazy.
It's been, justifiably people have been obsessed with it just lately because it's just been unbelievable, the weather.
This is the reason why we put this gap with the walk in the wall, because it just would have been, it wouldn't have been possible even today.
No.
Because
it's still
we have
really
another
windy.
storm.
It's still really windy.
This is our fourth storm in must be 10 days.
Yeah.
Because we had 3 storms in 7 days.
It's crazy.
It is.
It's just unbelievable and very un-English. I feel like it's very un-English.
But weather permitting, Walking the Wall is back next time. And if you enjoyed the first one, I suggest you prepare yourself, because you're going to need a lie down after the second one.
Wow.
It's really going to now ramp up and get exciting. Oh yes, so that's coming next time. But right now, it's time for the Endy Bits.
Endy Bits.
Oh yes.
I don't think I have anything.
Do you not have anything? That's okay.
No, only to say about our year-long knit-along
Now,
that we are doing.
yes, absolutely. I was going to mention the Great British Coastal Challenge
Yes.
too. Before you talk about that, the year-long knit-along is open to our Bakery Bear patrons. And a question that's been asked actually a few times recently by people who were asking about becoming patrons was, they've been asking, do I need to become a patron if all I want to watch is the main show? And the answer to that question is yes, because all our patrons are the reason why we're sat here broadcasting to you right now. Now, we have different levels of patronage, and if all you enjoy is the main show, then we have what's called our bronze level of patronage, and that supports and keeps this show on air. So if you value what we're doing, if you enjoy what we're doing, if you want to keep us making shows like Walking the Wall and My Favourite Colourways and Kay's Cozy Kitchen and all the wonderful things that are coming this year, then please sign up and become a Bakery Bear patron. And if you want to watch more, then yes, we have the silver, gold and platinum. But all our patrons, everyone who is a patron, can join in with our Great British Coastal Challenge.
Yes, and I'm doing updates on that every week, which is different to previous years that we've done it. We've done sort of quarterly updates, I think, really. But I'm doing it weekly this time in our Facebook group. So every week I'm going into there.
It's a private patrons Facebook group.
It's a private group, going in there on a Friday, and I'm posting details of how many meters we've knit that week, and then where we are, or what point we're at on the coast, and then just telling you something about that particular area. And last week we were actually on the East Sutherland coast in Scotland, right near to the town that was the inspiration for the book Winter Solstice by Rosamund Pilcher. So that was really interesting.
Yeah.
It is based on a real town. It's called Dornoch. Dornoch, that's funny. I've never said it out loud before. That's funny, isn't it? Dornoch on the Sutherland coast. That is Crechen in the book. So that was really interesting. So who knows where we're going to be this coming week.
Now, we also give whole updates monthly updates too on our patron-only show.
Yeah.
And when we give that monthly update, that's when we also include the runners and the walkers. And anybody, you don't have to be a patron.
No.
You can come and join our running and walking activity.
Yeah.
And our latest team, called Giggleswick,
Giggleswick, that's a great
is
name.
just starting to fill up. So if you want to come and join in with Team Giggleswick, then all the details on how you can get involved are in the show notes below. But we would love to welcome you onto the team. And then every patron-only show, we give an update. But there's also actually a Facebook group for the walking and the running too, where people post pictures and all sorts. It's marvellous. Speaking of our patron-only show, there's one coming up this week. And I suggest that you make a note in your diaries for it. And I shall tell you why. That's because Kay will be making an extremely important, very exciting announcement about our videos, our exclusive patron-only videos, which are coming this summer.
The summer, yes. It's going to fill the slot that previously, the last 2 years, we've done Knitty U, the Knitting University, doing something new this year. So it'll be in that sort of slot, that summer slot, and it's so incredibly excited about it. I've been working on it for a number of weeks.
And I'd be willing to bet that if I gave you 100 guesses, you would never guess what it was going to be.
I don't know if people would guess.
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't have the remotest.
There's one person that knows. Dr. Sarah knows. Don't tell anyone, Dr. Sarah. I know she won't.
Sarah, who we mentioned earlier on the show, loves pink.
Dr. Sarah knows all my secrets.
Seriously, I think I said this last show, but when I looked at what Kate planned, I said, this is so much more exciting.
Oh, it's been really fun because it could well be something that's completely new to you.
I think there's a good chance it will be.
It was completely new to me.
That's not quite true, because you're sort of crafting, which kept you going until you picked up the knitting needles again, was closely related to this.
Kind of.
Yes.
Yeah, well, kind of.
It feels more than kind of to me.
Don't talk anymore. Don't talk anymore. It's going to give it away.
All will be revealed on Sunday. And when are we broadcasting? It will be at 2 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on Sunday, the 27th of February. And I've already said it, 2 p.m. GMT. I won't repeat myself. Folks, my goodness, that's it. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been another marvellous My Favourite Colourways. But yes, next time...
Going to do some baking with Bryony now.
It's going to be marvellous.
Yes.
Next time when we see you, it'll be time to get back out, walking that walk. I cannot wait, actually. I'm so excited about this walk because we're going to be going to some places which have a huge amount of meaning to me, which I spoke about in the first episode.
Brilliant.
It's going to be great.
Can't wait.
So, yes, me too. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in 2
everybody.
weeks. Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Enthusiasm's not quitting for Dan and Kay, the bakery bears. They'll take you to fabulous places of which their favorites they'll share. You better buy a pattern and get yourself a bakery bear. You'll find yourself in a castle while watching the bakery bears. It never feels like a hassle to sit and watch the bakery bears. What's on your shelf or what's in your oven, or maybe a shawl you'll want to wear. So sit yourself right down